there's no recognized claim in the state of Texas for your husband, right, going and taking sole management community property and buying, a four-wheeler, a bunch of shotguns, and a boat. Okay, that's stuff that needs to be handled through a marriage counselor or a pastor or things like that. So, and all the people listening to this, though, some of our male listeners, are like, hey, Phil, I know I'm going to get the comment. Phil, I've got guns and a boat and a. I was like, yes, but have you figured out a way to make that work in the marriage? Okay. And answer's probably going to be not exactly at times, depending upon what kind of mood she's in, right? So, um,
That's how it goes. You gotta know what you're gonna get in trouble for and what you're not gonna get.
welcome to episode 115 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is March 27th, 2026. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who is our firm's supervising attorney and my wonderful co-host. Chris, we're just going to get into kind of reflection. Do you ever take time to reflect?
I do. I think it's important. Sometimes I really like to stop and take a breath. I feel like life moves at 200 miles an hour, and sometimes we really do need to stop.
Well, we're going to take a moment and we're going to reflect on our most popular pieces and topics we've discussed in the history of the show. Okay. So, and just tell me, I'm not going to have you guess. I'm going to tell you what the topic was and how many views we got. And you just tell me if you're surprised. All right. And this is based on Instagram. And look, frame of reference, I don't know what the definition of officially going viral is, but let me give you some context. We live in the world of AI. There is now more content being produced than ever because of AI. And finally, we're in a world where we have unlimited content production. But Chris, your consumption, the consumer's consumption of social media content is very much limited now. You only have so much time to, for your eyeballs to scroll. So that's the days of being this millionaire YouTube influencer probably are coming to an end, but I know there's still people out there doing that, and they've started much earlier. If you started a year ago, 2 years from now, or even if you're starting now, it's becoming harder and harder to be a well-paid YouTube influencer. So, and we're a boring legal show. So I just remember that. Okay. Now here's one. Here's our most popular piece of content. It was the towing sign one. Do you remember that one, Chris?
I do.
It was a piece about, when you go into a parking lot, where you can park and whether the sign is official or if it's just advisory. I still have people come up to me and I don't know and be like, I saw you did the towing piece on Instagram or whatever, or TikTok, because they're on all different platforms. I had a buddy of mine in the locker room. He's like 60 years old who, he was drunk. He's mostly drunk all the time, but someone asked me like, what, hey, are you practicing AI law now? And my drunk buddy's like, he's practicing towing law. So just because he saw the video piece, right? So not good. I mean, it's not what we practice. I was like, we don't do towing law, but
I do pay attention to all the signs now, and it just says dry cleaner only. I'm like, oh, I could park there if I wanted, but I still won't.
All right, 350,000 views for that piece. Okay, mostly in Texas. So if you're talking about a limited geographic area, that's enough views where people I don't know are recognizing me to come and say, oh, you're the towing guy, which I'm a little conflicted about the branding issue with that piece, Chris. But anyway,
right. Well, someone made that comment like, "Oh, he moonlights as a tow truck driver." I'm like we're trying to steer people the wrong way, and you're gonna tow their car after you give them bad advice.
Right. All right. Next most popular piece. Oh, first of all, before we go on to the next most popular piece, were you surprised by the towing piece being that popular?
I was, and that was the first one that you like actually texted me the next day and were like, "Hey, this is really going crazy."
Yeah.
Um, I do remember that. I was surprised and
Yeah.
shared it with everybody.
Okay, so next most popular piece, it drops off quite a bit from there. Okay, but the big law associate piece, like how many hours big law associates work. You remember that piece?
Vaguely.
Okay, that was very popular, and there was a lot of comments about how if you're an attorney that works at big firms or works a bunch of hours, you're basically a modern day slave and all this kind of stuff. Okay, um, yeah, 80,000 views. Are you surprised by how much interest that piece had?
Yeah, I would think. I don't know what the audience for that would be. Not big time lawyers. I wouldn't have think they would be looking at that, nor would I think the common man would really be all that interested in associate billing. But maybe people are just interested in
Mm,
law firm structures and how things are changing.
yeah, I agree. I was a little surprised by that. There were a lot of lawyers and kind of recovering lawyers that were commenting on that piece, and then just regular people, that wanted to talk about the hours worked. But okay, and then that was 80,000 views, and then some of this one really surprised me. Next most popular, it was the short or the segment we did on the summary judgment rule changes. And I remember the title of that show was A Really Boring Show About Summary Judgments. Yeah, that little short got 20,000 views. They're mostly lawyers. So,
I would imagine that's all lawyers, and we did it very timely. So like
uh,
rule change, um, you know, that's something you don't want to mess with. And people like video formats. We all read the rule. Obviously, I assume any attorney who saw our video went and read the rule too. But
you know,
you like that digestible stuff of somebody just telling you real quick, "Hey, there's some different rules, and here's what you need to pay attention to," because as we know, summary judgments are deadlines you don't mess with.
yeah. All right, that one had 20,000 views. This one was popular. It was a hearsay piece. When I asked you, are you the kind of lawyer that likes to object to hearsay? And you did that whole thing where you were talking about if you could throw them off their game, because then they may be dissuaded from getting other pieces of evidence in. People really like that. And it wasn't mostly lawyers. The general public found that one really interesting from a strategy standpoint. That one had about 16,000 views. Surprised or not surprised?
That seems more in line, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know how many views we usually get. It's not
Yeah.
200,000, but that seems more in line with kind of the stuff we would get. And it doesn't surprise me that people would be interested in that because, then we're getting into like legal strategy, fun stuff.
I think it was popular because you always hear common lay people say, "Oh, that's hearsay," right? That's just hearsay. That term comes up just in common English language. So very popular piece, 16,000 views. Normally, there's one more that did really well. FYI, a lot of just our average pieces get like 4 or 5,000 views, okay, on Instagram. So, and that's not a terrible thing. I always think about, imagine if you had 30 seconds to say something to 5,000 people, that'd be a pretty big deal, wouldn't it? If you had 5,000 people, that 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 were going to listen to you for even 20 seconds. That's you would probably prepare something for your 20-second speech, right? So,
Yeah, willingly listen too. They're not like a captive audience that
yeah.
has to listen to me talk in order to get, a free hotel weekend or something. They
Right.
have to listen to my sales pitch.
Yeah. Okay, now this one was surprising as well. I can't remember if this one was mostly lawyers or not, but the Friday afternoon motion, we did a little I asked you if you how do you feel about filing motions on Friday afternoon? Um, that one was very popular, 12,000 views. Surprised or not surprised?
No, that seems like one of those that, it's kind of an off the wall topic. And
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what we said. Hopefully we didn't come off as jerk attorneys that are like, yes, always ruin people's weekends. But I mean, it just seems to happen. Like I'm on a deadline today that happens to be on a Friday. So I I have to do it. I've got a Monday hearing that, is going to require some work. It just is. I don't intentionally want to mess with people, but if you got work to get out the door and, it's a particularly contentious case and you want to get it done and not have to worry about it over the weekend, that's what we do. You got to get filed and served.
Yeah, I think people like that piece because they were, kind of gives an insight into what it's like to be a lawyer. We have a lot of law students that listen to the show too, right? So they kind of want to know what it's going to be like. I wonder, I wonder if our show is causing a lot of people to drop out of law school.
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
a third-year law student told us from day one, we were like, wow, how do we prepare for practice court? Because we didn't actually know what we were getting into when we went to the other law school. And they said, quit now. He's, haha, you're kidding. And said, we are not kidding. Do
Well,
it. And of course, our pride got the better of us and we did not quit. And here we all are still practicing law.
Well, and with AI coming, I don't know that I can really recommend anybody, keep going. If you're in law school right now, maybe if you're in your third year and you're going to finish, if you're thinking about it, you may hold off. Go if you're a young person who just graduated college and you're like thinking about going to law school right now, you might be better off getting a job for a couple of years, waiting to see how the AI plays out, and then deciding which you're going to go into. That's totally a tangent, but that would be my advice. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I hate to give people life advice that I don't know, but yes,
Sure.
I will 100% agree with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a little bit of information. I think a lot of people are, like the transparency because I don't think on all these platforms you can see the views of these pieces. So, for some of our listeners, may be curious how many people out there are actually watching our stuff. But all right, let's talk a little bit what's on our docket. Kind of a shorter show. I've been working crazy hours, so short show. Um, we're going to do a legal question section. We're going to answer two legal questions, one about LLCs and EINs and dissolution. Then we're going to talk about some community property stuff. And when you get into an argument with your spouse, why the court is not the best place for that. And then finally, we're going to rant and rave a little bit about airport lines and TSA at the airports. Okay. So let's go ahead and get it kicked off with our legal question section. Here's the question. All right. So the client, this was something from our attorney chat room or space. Client's creating a new LLC in Texas. He's going to dissolve his LLC from another state. And the client wants to know, does he need a new EIN for the Texas LLC? Or can he just use the existing EIN for the Texas LLC? Did you follow all that, Chris? Or
I think so. If you have a foreign LLC that you're dissolving, then yeah, you need to get a new EIN for the new entity.
that's 100% correct. So you're dissolving the old one, firing up a new one in Texas. It's not the same entity. They're two entities. So you typically do that if you have a services business. Let's say you're, a painter and a house painter in Colorado. You want to move to Texas and start a painting company. You finish your last paint project in Colorado, your last house painting project in Colorado. You probably don't want to use the Colorado entity in LLC, although you could, but you don't want to because you might be subjecting yourself to Colorado state tax on the LLC. So you come to Texas, you want to be taxed by one state, you're going to get a new EIN, not a big deal. The reason for doing a foreign filing in Texas, where you may want that Colorado entity to operate in Texas, is if you're in some type of business where you've got long-term contracts that you can't just dump. There's some reason for continuing the LLC. Then you would be the same EIN, same entity, and you might be a Colorado entity with a right to transact business in Texas through a foreign filing. You could also convert the Colorado entity to a Texas LLC, and then you would have the same EIN. So does that make sense, Chris?
It does. That all makes sense.
All right, we nailed that one. That one's just done. So, all right, next legal question. And this was also from our attorney chat space. Do we have a family law attorney we send people to? Question mark. That's not the whole question, but sometimes there's a lot of family law attorneys out there. I have some friends that do good work, very good family law attorneys, but let's just say there's also there's a lot of bad family law attorneys out there too. And I don't mean to say you could look at being real estate like what we do, or business, or probate. I think disproportionately in the family law practice, there are probably more bad family law attorneys than good family law attorneys. We're not going to talk about why that is right now. I hope I'm not offending our family law attorney listeners. Know that if you're a listener, an avid listener to this show, that you're likely a good family law attorney.
Nice.
Okay. So the wife sold a house that was community property, but it was in her name only on the title. So Chris, we call that sole management community property, right? That means it's definitely community property, but wife has the right to sell the house. Title companies will often ask for the signature of spouses, but my wife has a lot of sole management community property. Okay. If she goes out and buys something with our community property funds, that's her sole management community property. So wife has a house, sole management community property. She sold it. She sold it, right? She didn't tell the husband, she just sold it. And the husband wants to recover the proceeds because the wife sold the house that was a rental income, and husband was like, wife, you bought a rental property. It's producing rental income, great investment. Wife decided that, she always wanted, some things in life, and she wanted to go buy an Hermes Birkin bag, right? And she also always wanted
Right.
right.
About what it was.
No, it's a little, not quite as much. Depends on the house, but no, not quite. She made me throw in some other stuff she wanted, right? She always wanted a Range Rover, a brand new Range Rover, and the husband would not let her have it because the Range Rover is the worst depreciating vehicle on the planet. It's also the least reliable vehicle. And she was like, honey, husband, I love you, but I'm selling, I'm going to go, he won't notice. And the rent check doesn't hit the account. He's like, where's the rent check? Oh, honey, I sold the property. I bought a Hermes Kelly bag in a Range Rover. And he's really mad, and he calls us up, or he's a client with us, and he's doing something. Probably we formed the LLC to house the rental property. And he calls, do you know a good family law attorney? I want to get this money back. My wife won't, she's bought these things, and I don't want the Range Rover, and I don't want the Kelly bag or the Hermes bag. Chris, do you have any, just off the cuff, any comments, advice?
You're kind of stuck. We never really know who we're marrying. That person is a human, and they have their own wants and desires, and you cannot control them. And I suppose there's a way to legally dissolve a marriage, but if I take a community property house and I turn it into a community property vehicle and a community property accessory, I don't know. Maybe you have a different take. I don't know what claim the spouse is going to have. All you've done is take community property and change it from one form to another.
Yeah.
On the community.
You're 100% right. The attorney that took this call, I don't, his first word out of his mouth, well, I guess you can get a divorce. Why don't you, do you need a divorce attorney? And he was like, no, I love my wife. I don't want a divorce. Well, then what do I do? And Chris, let me just say, the courts want, the last time I looked at this issue, I actually did not do research on this issue before the show. The last I looked at this issue, I think there's some case law out there where the courts in Texas have basically said, we want no part of these disputes between married people. All right. There are some limited exceptions to that based on my memory. I think it has to do with like abuse and maybe physical, torts between spouses. I think the courts will step in at that point. But this kind of thing, no. This is not, there's no recognized claim in the state of Texas for not to be sexist, so let's just turn it around. There's no recognized claim in the state of Texas for your husband, right, going and taking sole management community property and buying, a four-wheeler, a bunch of shotguns, and a boat. Okay, that's stuff that needs to be handled through a marriage counselor or a pastor or things like that. So, and all the people listening to this, some of our male listeners, like, hey, Phil, I know I'm going to get the comment. Phil, I've got guns and a boat and a. I was like, yes, but have you figured out a way to make that work in the marriage? Okay. And answer's probably going to be not exactly at times, depending upon what kind of mood she's in. Right. So, um,
That's how it goes. You gotta know what you're gonna get in trouble for and what you're not gonna get in trouble
yeah,
for.
yeah. All right. That brings us to my favorite part of the show. This is going to be a quick rant and rave section. Airport lines. Chris, no secret. There's a partial government shutdown with TSA. All right. The TSA lines are out of control. We don't know exactly how that works. I was going to research it, but I didn't really care because I was so mad about the airport lines and something to do with the funding specifically of TSA and why we can't get these people paid and why they won't come to work. And it turns out that the percentage of TSA agents calling in sick because they don't have a paycheck, I get it, is the highest in these cities: Atlanta, New Orleans, and Houston. Houston at Bush Intercontinental and Hobby, like 40% of all TSA lines or agents are calling in. I don't know why it's. We're not going to speculate upon that, but it is. And I'm supposed to fly out on a trip with my family. Right, I've got 4 kids, Chris, and one of those children is a 5-year-old, and I think the lines are averaging like 3 to 5 hours. And I've already told my wife, I was like, I don't care. I don't care if I lose money on the tickets. I'm not waiting in a TSA line 5 hours with my 5-year-old and 11-year-old and all this kind of stuff. I just forfeit the money. And Chris, this is where you come in. And the rant and rave is a little bit of that. This is the lines are off, but the rant and rave is more, Chris, I need you to tell me, because you're the kind of guy when we go golfing, you don't like me driving in the, past the white markers into the guy. If there's a house in the car, there's that white boundary, because I'm going to move, I'm going to kick that white boundary or down or whatever it is. I'm going to hit my approach shot out of that guy's St. Augustine grass in his yard. Okay. I'm that guy. And you flip out on me.
Yes.
I need your barometer of courtesy. My wife is like, okay, Phil, let's take the teenager, my oldest, big strapping 16-year-old guy who, and this kid, he, if you gave him a telephone and some earbuds or pods, whatever they're called, things in their ears all the time, and you said, Gabe, go wait in a 5-hour line, that's like a vacation. So
Right.
so my wife's like, Phil, send him to go wait in the line, and then we'll arrive much later. And then just when he gets to the front, he'll let us in, the other 5 of us. And I was like, honey, I don't know. There's people like TSA agents are getting us. Chris is shaking his head no for the Spotify listeners out there.
I could not do that. I would.
Okay.
Why? No effing way could I do that.
Okay. So you think my concern was actually for our physical safety, because the TSA agents are getting assaulted. It's terrible. Like the assaults are like way up because can you imagine how people feel after waiting 5 hours in line?
Yeah.
And I'm like, honey, if we're like, just like roll up and then I'm like, Gabe, let us in.
And think about how those, have switchbacks and stuff like that. And how hard would it be for you to maneuver through all those people and then to be like, aha, we found our spot. Here it is.
I was
I
hoping
do
that,
think you would meet some physical resistance. I think you might be forcibly removed.
okay. I'm glad you're giving me, and I'm gonna have my wife listen to this part of the show because I was a little taken aback by the suggestion. My wife was like, "Well, they should be mad. They didn't. It's too sad, too bad, too sad. They didn't think about it." And I was like, "Look, I'm the guy that kind of drives over people's lawns on a golf course, and even I feel a little uncomfortable with with that one." So.
Yeah.
All right, that's very helpful, Chris. And on that note, we've got to bring our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Chris Heald has been my very gracious co-host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com and tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend.